Are we going? Oh,
Yeah.
okay. Hi, everybody. Welcome to the parenting webinar. My name is Jordan, and I'm a counselor at our residential program, and Charlotte is also here with us. So we'll go ahead and get started. So before we get started into the information, we wanted to talk about safety when watching these. So please be sure to watch these in a safe place where only safe people can hear it. Remember to clear your browser history afterwards. Use a headphone if possible to ensure that no one else can hear. And then if you need to leave the live Zoom webinar quickly, remember that you'll need to click end a few times and then close out of the Zoom page. For confidentiality, please do not use the chat feature on our Zoom. If you use the chat feature, your name and comment will be seen by anyone watching this and anyone watching it after it's recorded. So it's important you don't use that. And if you do leave any comments on the YouTube video, your name and comment will also be seen by anyone else who watches it, and we don't monitor that, and unfortunately we don't have a way to take it off as well. So make sure not to do that. Here's some information about our services at Genesis. So if you are in crisis, need help with safety planning, you're looking for emergency shelter due to domestic violence, please call our 24-hour hotline number, available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and that number is 214-946-4357. And then if you're not already a client at Genesis and are interested in our counseling services, wanting to talk to a counselor about your situation, or wanting to get connected to our advocacy services, that number is 214-389-7700. Again, I said this earlier, but if you have any questions, remember that we don't monitor the chat on the webinar. So if you do have any questions, please contact us directly. You can contact Charlotte or I, and our contact information will be at the end of this slideshow. And here, lastly, are just some hotline resources for you. So again, it has our phone number, the National Domestic Violence Hotline number, and then the National Suicide Hotline. So some resources for you. And now we'll get started. So we've been doing ARC, attachment regulation and competency, and we are going to finish that up today and then move on from this afterwards. So I'll get started with this. And so this is a recap. I know we talked about this in the past few weeks, but going to provide a little bit of information on about domestic violence specifically before we get on to the parenting strategies. So at Genesis, we specifically work with women and children who've been impacted by domestic violence at some point in their lifetime. We do this while also keeping in mind any other traumas the child may have experienced and how this can amplify the symptoms they are experiencing as a result of the domestic violence. And what domestic violence is when one person in an intimate relationship exerts power and control over the other through a pattern of abusive behaviors. And this pattern and these behaviors could be in the form of verbal abuse, emotional abuse, physical abuse, and sexual abuse. And so the point of that is for that partner to gain power and control over the other partner in that relationship. So witnessing this type of violence is extremely traumatizing for children, no matter if they've just witnessed verbal abuse, emotional abuse, physical abuse, and even sexual abuse, right? And even if you don't think your children are witnessing this, children can definitely sense when there is tension or when there is a power dynamic, or even when there is, when one person is fearful of that other person in the household. And so that definitely, is a traumatic experience for children and can create some trauma symptoms that will display in kiddos. So we're going to quickly talk about what is trauma. So trauma refers to experiences that are overwhelming and may leave a person feeling helpless, vulnerable, or even frightened. Trauma may include specific types of events, such as being in an accident or experiencing a natural disaster like a hurricane or an earthquake. Trauma may also be ongoing stressors, such as family violence or domestic violence. Children can be deeply affected by ongoing stressors, such as poverty, racism, or repeated bullying, discrimination, particularly when related to characteristics of the child's social identity. And so I know we've talked about this in the past webinars, but when children experience trauma, right, It can display in children in a wide variety of different behaviors or feelings. And so that could be nightmares, feelings of fear, hypervigilance, maybe self-blame when the trauma has not been their fault, maybe having trouble concentrating on schoolwork or concentrating in anything in their lives. Maybe they have trouble connecting with others, or maybe they're withdrawing from relationships. And so trauma can look like a lot of different, can display in a lot of different ways in children. So we today are going to specifically talk about what it looks like when children are triggered, even when moms are triggered, how you can support your children in those triggers and be attuned to how your body's feeling and how you can tell when you are being triggered. So for children, it can be really hard to identify a specific trigger, but you can also learn to read the signs that your child is showing in that danger response. And so if your child is triggered and they go in that fight response, right, this is going to display with signs of arousal, which can appear as anger, hyperactivity, irritability, swearing, even their physical body, right? They could tense up, maybe they try to hit you. And so that will look like if they're in that fight response. The next one is the flight response. And so this is going to look more physical withdrawal or escape. So they're going to avoid contact with others. Maybe they isolate themselves. Maybe they refuse to engage in things such as homework, running away, right? Maybe if your child's triggered, they run away and go hide. So this can look like a lot of different things. The next response is freeze. And so for your children, this is going to look like shutting down or disconnecting. So maybe you're calling your child's name and they look like they're looking off into the distance. Maybe they have a blank state. They appear very dazed. And so they're not in the present moment, right? And so when your child is in that freeze response, we've talked about this, but that's when you're going to want to help your child ground themselves and bring them back into that present moment. And then that last response down at the bottom, submit or comply response. And so this looks like your child is overly compliant. So they give in really easy. Maybe they deny their needs. So when they're hungry or thirsty, they don't know how to ask for their needs to be met, or they just ignore, right? They're not attuned to what their body needs, and so they're ignoring that. Also, they'll give you false reassurance. So this would look like, asking your child, how are they? I'm fine. Everything's okay, right? And so they're not expressing really any positive emotions, any negative emotions, and they're just saying everything's okay. So some examples of triggers, and these are just a few. But maybe hearing people yell in a loud voice could remind your child of being yelled at in the past, or even past incidents of domestic violence, right? And so if your partner's constantly being loud or yelling, and then they hear someone else yell, that could definitely put them into a state of fight, flight, or freeze response. Feeling alone or being ignored could remind your child of times that they did not get enough attention or their needs were not met. The smell of smoke, right? This could remind them of a traumatic event, say that they experienced a really traumatic fire, right? And so every time they smell smoke, they go into that fight, flight, and freeze response. I think it's important to remember when we're talking about triggers, they can be activated, right, by senses. So smell, seeing, hearing things, even a taste could put your child back into that fight, flight, and freeze response, depending if it triggered a past traumatic event. And so that's why it can be really difficult to recognize what triggered your child, and also it can be difficult for your child to verbalize that, right? Because sometimes they don't even know why they just went in that fight, flight, freeze response. So it's sometimes easier to help them when recognizing what trigger response are they having, and then go from there on how to help them, which Charlotte, I'll talk about that at the end. And so again, right, it's going to help to learn your child's emotional language. And so these are some different things to think about that can help you be attuned to your child and be able to read, what they're trying to express. And so that first one is facial expression, right? So how does your child show his or her face, right? What's their facial expression? The tone of voice, does your child's voice become louder, softer, high-pitched in certain situations, or when they're being triggered? The extent of speech, so does your child suddenly have more to say than usual? Does your child become quiet? How pressured and a rush is your child's speech? Is it going really fast, really slow? The next one is quality of speech. And so does your child's words become disorganized? So do they ramble? Are they stilted? Are they regressed? Regressed, right, would be maybe they start talking like a baby. And so developmentally, they've regressed a little bit in that moment. The next one, posturing, muscular expression. So what does your child's body look like, right? Where are their shoulders tense? Are they crouched down? What are they doing with their hands? Are they getting big, right? And so looking at what they're showing with their body. The next one, approach versus avoidance. So does your child become withdrawn, clingy, both? At what moments, do they express themselves that way? So in what moments do they become extra clingy to you? What moments do they withdraw from you? And one of the last ones, affect modulation and capacity. So this would be, does your child seem to have a harder time than usual being soothed and or self-soothing? And finding out, what helps your child be soothed. And then lastly, mood. So does your child's mood overtly change, and how quickly does it change? And also, right, there's a lot of other ways to read your child's emotional language. And so thinking about what other clues are there that your child is experiencing that gives you, leads you on to helping you figure out what emotion they're feeling. And then tuning into yourself, right? And so we just talked about how to tune into your child, but it's also important to tune into yourself in these situations, right? When your child is triggered, is it triggering you? And being aware of your body sensations and how you feel. And so some points on how to tune into yourself, right, through your body. So what are you experiencing in your body? Your breathing, your muscle tension, maybe numbness, so maybe you don't feel anything at all. And then what warning signs does your body provide of losing control, right? So do you lose control and get so angry, or hyperactive, right? Or when you lose control, do you just go numb and have that blank stare, right? So you're not in the present moment. And so when reflecting back on moments maybe that you did feel like you lost control, what were the warning signs to that? And then how can you help that when you notice the warning signs in future situations from getting to a point of loss of control? The next, thoughts, right? What do you think in this situation? Thoughts about yourself in these situations. What are you telling yourself? Thoughts about your child, right? It's going to be normal to maybe have some unrealistic thoughts, negative thoughts about yourself and your child that aren't true. Emotions, right? What do you feel in these situations? In this situation, feelings of guilt, anger, sadness, your behavior. So what do you do in this situation? Do you scream? Do you withdraw? Do you freeze? Kind of noticing, right, when you're in that fight, flight, and freeze response, what do you tend to do? And then other. So what do you just notice about yourself, your ability to cope with your emotions, ability to use your supports, noticing what unhealthy or healthy coping skills you have, and unhealthy coping responses. And also, how easy is it for you to access those coping responses, or how easy is it for you to reach out for support and help when you need it? So now I'm going to turn it over to Charlotte.
Thank you, Jordan. So just kind of after you notice that your child's triggered and you start tuning into them, and like Jordan was saying, tuning into yourself. So kind of reflecting back on what makes a hard day. What are the days that you find your buttons are pushed or leads to big feelings in you? And this week, try to notice if any of these things happen and how they affect your mood. So just being really aware of When are you feeling triggered as a parent? When are you feeling overwhelmed? And ask yourself, what is my body telling me in those moments? What am I feeling, thinking, and what do I want to do? So that way, when you're in a calm state of mind, you can kind of prepare yourself for the week ahead of when are going to be my challenging moments and what can I do in those moments to keep control, maintain regulation, and deal with the situation. So a body map for caregivers. So what clues are your body giving us about energy? Our bodies tell us a lot about what we're feeling and what we're experiencing. We all have energy in our bodies, and they can tell us about something about how we're feeling. Sometimes our energy is comfortable and sometimes it's uncomfortable, and it can show up in our thoughts, behaviors, feelings, and the ways that we interact with our children. Our bodies give us clues about the level of energy that we're having. So for example, if we pay attention to the pace of our breathing, the rate of our heartbeat, the temperature of our bodies, the amount of tension in your muscles, are you keeping your shoulders tense? Is your neck tense? And we can gather a lot of information about this energy. So if you notice that maybe your neck and shoulders are really tight, and maybe you feel really hot, maybe this is an indication that you're starting to feel really overwhelmed and maybe you're triggered. Just checking in with your breathing. Is it fast, medium, slow? Your muscles, are they tense, like an uncooked spaghetti noodle might be, or relaxed like cooked spaghetti? That's also a good example that you can use with your kiddos to help them start to have more awareness of their muscle tension. And just body temp. How does your body temperature feel? So after you have tuned into your child, you realize that maybe they've been triggered by something, you've tuned into yourself, what can you do? How can you respond when your child is triggered? So first, you might need to change your child's environment, especially if they're a younger kiddo, if it's a really overstimulating environment. Maybe you're in a concert, or it's a really loud basketball game, you're in the gym, something like that. Maybe it's necessary to remove the child from the environment and give them some space to be able to calm down. This can also, a lot of times there's embarrassment with becoming triggered. And if there's a lot of people in the room that are watching, that might be hard for a child to calm down if they feel like people are observing them. So again, just changing their environment if that helps. And the connect and redirect technique. This is one that we went over during our Whole Brain Strategies series at the beginning. The key to this is that when you notice that your child has become really overwhelmed or overly emotional and they just seem consumed by their emotion, the idea is to comfort and soothe them first. Y'all are all experts in your own children and what's soothing and comforting to them, and depending on their age. So that might be using a really soft tone of voice, making eye contact, getting down on their level. Maybe they want to sit on your lap, give a hug, whatever. Sometimes distraction with younger kiddos is really helpful, but just helping them to calm down, validate their emotions, whatever it was, were they overly sad or were they overly frustrated? Whatever it was that they were feeling, once they're calm, you can help validate that emotion. Yeah, you were really frustrated. And so just kind of validating that for them. And then once they're calm and they're validated, then you can discuss what is the solution to this problem? What is a compromise that you and I can come to? Or maybe you're discussing a consequence because they broke a family rule or they passed a limit that you've already set for them. But the key here is to not discuss any of those solutions, compromises, or consequences until your child is calm. And then support them in their coping skills. If they have established coping skills that work for them, maybe they need some assistance. Maybe you have a child that's already really good at controlled breathing, but they need you to help with them. So maybe you're just holding their hands and you're deep breathing with them. And maybe they just want some support in whatever, they don't want to be alone. They want you to be with them to assist them with their coping skill. And then you can plan for next time your child might be exposed to that trigger. So this might give you a lot of information about what triggered your child, what their trauma response was. So that can give you some really helpful information for the next time they might be exposed to that trigger. What coping skills can they use before, during, and after exposure to that trigger? So maybe it's really loud noise. So if you know you're going to your siblings' basketball game, you can talk to your kiddo about what can we do that's really calming before, during, and after. So that way you can try and maintain some emotional regulation. I statements. I statements are a really effective way to communicate, whether this is with your children or really in any relationship. The idea is that rather than making statements that feel blaming, insulting, or aggressive, and otherwise putting someone on the defense, I statements are more focused on your own feelings and your own reactions. Someone can challenge a you statement. A you statement might be, "You're such a jerk." But someone can argue back, "No, I'm not. I'm not a jerk. You're being a jerk." But it's harder for someone to challenge or argue with an I statement. If you're just saying, "I'm angry," it's hard for someone to argue with you that you're feeling angry. So it kind of, it helps to or keep situations from escalating when you're having a conflict. I statements express how we feel and why we feel that way. They allow us to work on solutions and resolve conflicts. You statements in contrast often increase conflict or negative situations. So for example, "I cannot believe that you did that. You're such a jerk." Versus, "I'm really angry about what you did. I need some space from you right now." What reaction might there be to each of these statements? So you just you can tell that there's a difference in the tone and the intention behind the statement, and it can be a lot more effective and productive using I statements. It's something that might take some practice getting used to, but it can be really helpful with conflict resolution. So I just want to do a little bit of a review over this series. We've talked a lot about some different strategies, tips, techniques that you can use when you are just helping your child's development, but also helping your child if they've been exposed to some trauma. So attunement. This is just going to be the ability to really tune into your child and read and understand your child's cues and respond in a way that helps them manage their own emotions, cope with the stressful situations that they're facing, and make good decisions. So this is just really being in tune and having a really good understanding of your child's behaviors and how they manage their stress. Mirroring. So once you are attuned to this, or attuned to your child, mirroring is really important. This is just going to be searching for what is underneath their behavior, trying to dig a little bit deeper, helping them to label their emotions, and always validating and normalizing whatever emotions they are experiencing. Some mirroring statements, you can be like, "It seems like you're feeling really angry when you didn't get dessert tonight." Or, "It makes sense that you would be disappointed that you lost your championship soccer game." So just kind of mirroring some things in that way they can tell you if it's true or not true, but you're helping them to kind of explore a little bit what's underneath the behavior, what's going on, and validating those emotions for them. Praise and reinforcement. So the idea is you want to focus your attention and shift your focus to what your child is doing well. What's positive that's going on, and trying to praise and reinforce that, as opposed to focusing most of your attention on what your child might be doing that you don't want them to be doing. Praise and reinforcement increase the positive behaviors that you're seeing. So if you notice that your children are all playing together really nicely, and they're sharing and they're playing a game, you might praise and try to praise and reinforce that. "I love how y'all are all playing so nicely together." If your child was overwhelmed and was able to utilize one of their own coping skills, you would want to praise that. "I saw you were so overwhelmed, but you realized what was going on in your body. You picked a coping skill and you utilized that, and it helped you calm down. That's so great." So just praising and reinforcing whenever you see something that you want to see more of. Helping problem solving with your child. So this is just showing them that you have a willingness to help them solve their problems. This might just look like a kind of collaboration of, okay, what is the problem that we have here? What are our options? What can we do? What are the pros and cons to each option? And just kind of weighing this out for them and helping them to make this decision. And this might be a problem that they already have currently, or this might be a problem that they anticipate having. Well, I know that I'm going to have a really difficult test on Thursday, and that usually is triggering for me. Okay, that's our problem. What can we do to help solve that problem? Setting limits is always going to be really important. It's helpful for children to know exactly what's expected of them, to know what their limits are, and those be established while things are calm. So that way they already know what the limit is. And this helps to create a very safe and consistent and structured lifestyle to where everybody knows what's expected and they know exactly what consequence will happen if they breach that limit or pass that limit. Establishing daily routines. This is also really important. Children respond really positively to routine, and especially children that have been impacted by trauma. So just trying to think about your routine every day, your morning, afternoon, evening, bedtime routines, making sure that they're really consistent, and finding opportunities to incorporate regulation and modulation activities into your routine. So this is going to be opportunities for your child to get gross motor movement. So some big exercise, yoga, sports, running, anything like that. Providing them opportunities for sensory activities. So that might be, could be anything from stress balls and slime and Play-Doh and sand tray to a water play. Maybe this looks like they have their own little private area in the house, like in the corner of their room or in a closet that's private, and it's their little special calm down area. So just kind of finding some opportunities to incorporate some of those moments for your child to help regulate throughout the day. And then that helps them to establish some of these skills that are always calming for them when they need it. So thank y'all so much for being here today. Just contacting us and attending this parenting webinar. You've made such a big step towards helping to support your child, and we really appreciate y'all being here. This is our information. You're welcome to screenshot it if you'd like to contact us. And again, thank you so much for being here, and y'all have a great day.